Good evening and welcome to Unravelling. Hopefully you have watched our videos from part 1, where we have been exploring our culture and the stories that shape the ways that we think and behave. If you haven't seen those videos yet, I recommend that you pause this, go back and watch those, because tonight we are moving into part 2 of Unravelling our worldviews. And as per usual, we have our audience with us tonight who will have their chance later on to ask some questions. So I'm joined by Tim again.
Evening.
It's great to have you back.
Good to be back, thank you.
So this time we've called part 2 Unravelling Worldviews.
Yeah.
So what sort of things are we going to be exploring in that?
So as you just said, obviously part 1, the videos we've done already, we're really looking at our culture and the stories that we tell one another, and therefore the worldview that we each have. We talked about the glasses, didn't we? The way we see the world. So tonight we want to move on from culture really to exploring a Christian worldview.
Okay.
The way that Christianity teaches us to see and understand the world. And inevitably then we're going to be kind of comparing the two a little bit to see what they both have to say about what's true and what's good. Yeah. And the hope is that then this puts us in a good position to start approaching the issues of gender, sex, sexuality that we want to come on to in the later parts of Unravelling. So
yeah, because I think it's going to be really important to understand more of the groundwork that we've got here, because then we want to be able to understand why we think what we think.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, when we get to those tricky issues later on, we're going to struggle if we don't know those things.
Yeah, we might have some opinions, but with no idea of where they come from.
Yes.
Why we think what we think, as you said. But if we actually kind of want to work these issues out properly, then we need to know why we think what we think, as best we're able to anyway.
Yes. So I'm actually really looking forward to tonight. So what specifically are we going to be dealing with?
So specifically, we're going to be looking at a Christian worldview with regard to epistemology, which is a posh word that really is to do with knowledge.
Yeah.
So tonight we want to look at what Christianity has to say about what the truth is, and how any human being can come to know that truth, and to what extent, those kind of questions.
Okay. So we're thinking about coming to know the truths and knowledge, and are we thinking about things like meaning and purpose as well?
Yeah. That's really important, that kind of, as we'll go on to see in a Christian worldview, truth and meaning and purpose all kind of come together as a package, really.
Lovely. Why have we chosen to specifically focus on epistemology?
So the reason that epistemology is so important is, if you remember in the 2 cultural stories we explored, the top of the flowcharts for both were the same. Do you remember this?
Yes. So they started at the same point.
Yeah. And
they differed slightly a lot as we moved down.
That's right. And hopefully you'll also remember this image that we used in the first video together. So what those 2 stories had in common was really that they were built on this one circle worldview, which is on the right-hand side of our screen there, that says that there is nothing outside of nature. Yeah. There's just the physical and chemical material existence that there is. Yeah. And we're within that. Okay. And because of that, as we saw in those evenings, that means that there's no kind of truth out there. Yeah. And there's only the truth that we create. Okay. And we saw how for the identity story, we focus on the truth that we create kind of individually. Yeah. And in the power and oppression story, it was the truth that we create as societies or social groups.
Together.
That's right. And the important thing about all of that really was that our conclusion was then there's no objective truth. There's only the truth for you, or the truth for me, or perhaps the truth for some of us. Okay. And that went on to kind of deliver all the other things that we explored in those stories. Okay.
So does that mean then we're going to be going into the debate of which is the way to go? You know, are we going to be discussing the argument, is God real? Isn't God not real?
Yeah, which is more reasonable starting point. Yeah. The answer's no, really. It's not because that's not important. Okay. It's obviously kind of really important whether God exists or not. But that's just not the debate that we're trying to focus on in Unravelling. What we're really trying to do is more say, kind of given those different starting points, what are the worldview that comes from that, and how do they compare? Yeah. Rather than arguing for kind of which is more reasonable.
Okay, great. And I suppose it's not only important to focus on this because it's important, but also because a Christian worldview has something different to offer.
Exactly. So this is the main point of contrast that we want to explore today.
Okay.
So, are you ready to get stuck into a new flowchart?
Yes. Oh, you got a new flowchart?
I've got a new flowchart. So here we go. Here is our new flowchart. So, for Christians then, if we go to our flowchart, we start with the assumption that God is real.
Yep.
And if he's real, then everything else that exists was created by him. So nature, us, kind of the world around us was all finds its origin in him. And therefore, he's the ultimate source of truth and reality and meaning. It resides in him primarily, rather than in nature and in us. And for something to have purpose, it has to have been kind of intended.
Okay.
And so that means that meaning and purpose also primarily resides in God, rather than in us. So what's true about us, what's true about our world, it's not based in me or in you or in our views. It's based in him as the kind of author of ultimate reality. Does that kind of make sense as the Christian starting point?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it makes sense because surely if God was the one who made us, if he made humans, then he knows what a human is. What he's made us to be.
If we think if God creates on purpose, he didn't have to create, he chose to create.
Yes.
So because he does it on purpose, he does it kind of deliberately. And therefore there must have been a why, a reason for that. And that's what gives us a sense of meaning. There was kind of on purposeness of God's creation. And that's what fundamentally means that we can kind of have confidence that there is meaning. And know where that meaning finally resides. So kind of we see on our flowchart, if God is real, then he has to be the one that defines truth and reality and meaning.
And when we're talking about this knowing the truths, knowing about all of this, that's when we're talking about epistemology.
Yeah, that's right. And so kind of if the first point is that all true knowledge resides in God, then the second thing that we need to explore is kind of whether that knowledge that resides in God can ever also be known by us, by humans like us. So the Christian worldview says, we can come to know the truth, but this is going to need a fair bit of explanation and a couple of qualifications. And that's kind of the bulk of what we're going to spend our time on tonight. So as Christians, we claim that one of the ways that God has made us is he's made us with the ability to come to know the truth. Perhaps this is part of what it means to be made in the image of God, which is one of the claims that we make as Christians. But what we cannot do, on the next stage of our flowchart, what we cannot do as Christians is come to make the truth. As Christians, we live with a mimetic worldview, where our kind of ability to know the truth is about coming into line with the truth that God defines, not creating truth for ourselves. If that makes...
Which is very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can you give me like an example to help us ground this a little bit?
So the image I'd choose to use is an image we find kind of regularly in the Bible of the potter and the clay. So you look at the picture of the potter shaping this kind of cup or bowl there. And because the potter's the one who makes the clay, he has kind of chosen to make the bowl that way. He's got in mind what it's for. Maybe that bowl's going to be to eat fruit out of or something. And it would make no sense for the kind of bowl to turn around and say, well, actually, I don't want to be a bowl any longer. I've decided that I'm going to be a racing car. And that's essentially kind of what we're saying, that to put the metaphor back into us, kind of, I can come to know the truth that I am a bowl. Come to know the truth that's defined by God. But what I can't do is make up the truth that I'm a racing car.
I'll make up my own truth.
That illustrates a little bit the difference between the two.
And that's why we use the word poiesis, the cultural worldviews, because that's about us trying to make the truth for ourselves.
Exactly, which is what our cultural worldviews taught us. Whereas the point and difference with the Christian worldview is we say, no, we can't make the truth. But we can come to know the truth.
Great. So obviously we're not God. So how do we come to know the truth as he knows it?
So that's actually a really important kind of little side point you just made, that we can't come to know the truth exactly as God knows it, but we'll come to that more at the end. for now, we need to dive into how we can know something of the truth, which takes us to the next point of our flowchart. So, if truth ultimately resides in God, like we've said, and we are within nature, then the only way that we can come to know the kind of true truth, the truth that resides in God, is if he reveals it to us in some way, if he allows us to come to know the truth that he fully knows.
Okay.
And so we talk about revelation when we talk about that. And broadly, there's sort of two main ways that God reveals the truth to us. And if we go to our flowchart, the one main way we would headline as general revelation, and the second one would be special revelation.
So by revelation, then, you mean that this is God revealing truth to us in some way, that we can only know truth if God reveals it to us?
Yeah, that's right, if he kind of shows it to us. So I realise that this might be an unfamiliar category for some of us to think in, but the claim is basically that we only know the truth if God chooses to give it to us as a gift. And revelation is the word that we use because he kind of reveals, he shows to us what he himself knows. And the two main categories that we break revelation down into are general revelation and special revelation. And by general revelation, really, we just mean the knowledge that we can acquire in our kind of everyday normal lives. Or to put it more precisely, it would be the knowledge that we can gain through the use of our reason and our experience in nature. So
give us an example.
Okay, so an example would be, you know that 2 + 2 = 4.
I do.
And I know that 2 + 2 = 4, and the whole room knows that 2 + 2 = 4. And of course we know that 2 + 2 = 4 as we kind of achieve quite a low level of rational ability. We can come to know that truth. And there's all sorts of truth that we can learn like that through the use of our reason. Or to change the example, we also know that if we go out in the rain without a coat, we're going to get wet. Because we've learned that through our experience over time, which has given us knowledge. So this is the sort of thing that we mean by general revelation.
Okay, great. So what you're saying then is this basic sort of knowledge that we have, that is God revealing truth to us.
That's right, because God chose to make us the way he made us. He chose to make us rational creatures. He chose to make us sensory creatures, able to use our reason and to use our experience to know the truth. So in this way, all of that is seen as a kind of gift of God through which he reveals the truth to us. And it's called general revelation because we can all learn this truth no matter what we believe. Whether we believe in God or not. We can still come to know the truth in these ways, hence it's general revelation available to all.
A gift to all of us.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. But I want to ask a question. So the examples you used about general revelation, you use the example of maths and the weather. But are we saying, or are you saying that using our reason and our experiences is also how we learn about things, learning about things like ethics or morals? So that's also how we come to know about those things.
My examples might have seemed a bit trivial, but you're right, we can also come to know about more important things through the use of our reason and experience. In fact, as Christians, we do hold to the view that our reason and our experience are really important in coming to know something of God and good, bad, morality, that sort of thing. But they're not necessarily enough, and that's why we also need to talk about special revelation, which is that general revelation on its own can't give us enough knowledge of the truth. And hence special revelation fills out the picture.
Brilliant. So what is special revelation then?
So by special revelation, perhaps obviously we mean a way of revelation that's not normal in the way that general revelation is. Say, we might talk about supernatural revelation or miraculous revelation, but essentially it's a way that we're gaining some knowledge of the truth that's not in our normal experience. As Christians, really, we believe that God has acted in history, that he has communicated to us in these kind of non-normal ways through people, to people. And perhaps the ultimate example of that is in Jesus Christ himself. So we believe that God became human, became incarnate,
Yeah.
And that through the life of Jesus, God revealed himself to us in Jesus' words and his life, his death, his resurrection, his ascension. And for us, this is the kind of ultimate case of special revelation, but obviously we live 2,000 years after Jesus.
Yeah.
So for us Christians now, the truth that Jesus reveals is primarily mediated to us through the Bible. So if you see kind of on our flow chart under special revelation, we've got scripture there, which is another word for the Bible. And that really references that for us, kind of it's the Bible is perhaps the most important special revelation of God to us by which we can come to know the truth.
So special revelation is special then because it's not in our normal experience.
Yeah, that's right. We believe that general revelation is important, but not fully sufficient, that God has used these special revelatory ways to people as well to bring us into a fuller knowledge of the truth than we would have known otherwise.
Okay, so this makes sense to me because we talk about like reading the Bible and we say it's God's word.
Yeah.
Which implies that is God speaking to us.
Yeah.
To us directly.
Yeah, the word of God.
Yeah.
Carries that idea, doesn't it? That he's communicated to us through that. And as Christians, we believe and experience that through the Bible, God makes himself known to us. And that's why it holds such an important position in our worldview of how we come to know the truth. But as important as the Bible is, it's not the only means of special revelation.
Okay.
We also, in special revelation, need to consider the ways that God has revealed himself to his church throughout the centuries. So through experiences people have had of God, through the way that people have understood and interpreted the Bible over time.
Yeah.
And we refer to all of this by the term tradition.
So that's using the word tradition in that context is quite different to how I would normally understand the word tradition. When you say tradition to me, I sort of think the ways that we've always done things or traditions that we hold, traditions that we have, but you're using it in a different way.
Yeah, by tradition, I am just talking about the experience of God that Christians have had through the centuries.
Okay.
And the way our kind of combined knowledge of how we read and interpret the Bible. And so that completes special revelation, really. So we have scripture and tradition and general revelation. And it's the coming together of these two main categories that gives us as Christians all the ways that we come to know what's true.
Great. So could you take us through the flow chart then again, from the start to the end so we know where we're at?
If we just walk it through so it all hangs together. So if God's real, then he's the one that defines truth and reality and meaning and purpose. It all exists in him. And what that means for us is that although we can come to know the truth, we can't make the truth.
Yeah.
And that raises the inevitable question then of, say, how then do we come to know the truth? How do we come to know the true truth, the real reality?
Yeah.
So we have general revelation and special revelation, the kind of human experience, reason, scripture, tradition. And these are the four main ways that we come to know the truth within a Christian worldview.
Okay. So out of these ways that we come to know the truth, is there one way that is more important than the other? Like, is there a way that one trumps the other?
Yeah.
And if so, and also, I suppose, what do we do if we're using two of these ways, but they might contradict one another?
So, like, for example, if you thought you saw pigs flying past your window, but your reason tells you that pigs don't fly.
Yeah,
that sort
exactly. Yeah, I think it's things like, as well, if we say read something in the Bible, but we don't understand it, then if they're in contradiction with each other, what do we do with that?
Yeah, okay. So two questions there, really, kind of, is there one way of knowing that's more important? And then what do we do when they seem to contradict each other? So perhaps if we take them in that order.
Okay.
So in terms of if there's one that's more important than the others, then as Christians we'd affirm that all four are really important.
Okay.
But if there is one that has more authority than the others, then usually we would say that is the Bible.
Right.
And you will find some differences among Christians. So different Christians will weigh these factors a little bit differently, have slightly different things that they believe about the Bible. But for the vast majority, if pushed to say what's the most important way we know the truth, then the Bible would be the most authoritative. And You can kind of see that in the sense that through the centuries, Christians have been known as people of the book.
Okay.
And the importance of reading and studying the Bible indicates its importance as authority for us in coming to know the truth about ourselves, about God, about the world out there. Of course, the Bible's never detached from the other three ways of knowing the truth. I wouldn't want to give that impression. Kind of whenever we read the Bible, we have to use our reason.
Yeah.
And every time we're reading a text, we are having an experience.
Okay.
And we're always relying on tradition as well. For example, when you and I read the Bible, we're reading it translated, which other Christians have done for us. So reading the Bible is never separated from the other three.
Okay.
But it is still the most authoritative, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So are we going to be getting into why we believe what we believe about the Bible? I would imagine for some people listening or watching, that's going to be a question on their mind.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it is a really important question. Why do we believe this about it? Why do we believe it's God's word? Why do we believe it's so authoritative? Why do we believe God's revealed himself in this way? But although those questions are really important, we aren't going to get into them tonight. A bit like we said earlier about, is it more reasonable to believe God exists or not? Yeah. It's a really important question.
Okay.
It's just not what we can tackle in Unraveling. It's going to take
us on a tangent.
Yeah, we want to really explain a Christian worldview. We can't defend it at every point.
Okay.
But we can sort of speak about that another time, or if people want to ask questions, we can maybe tackle some of them at the end. Great. But we have to kind of leave that to be able to get through what we need to get through,
So can you tackle the second question then? What do we do when two or more of these ways of knowing when they contradict
one another? In honesty, it's probably best to tackle that question when we've finished our flow chart. So you can hold me accountable to come back to it.
Yeah, but I won't let you dodge it completely.
But in order to really deal with that question, we do need to just finish the flow chart. So is it okay if we kind of dive back into that?
Great.
So we're nearly there now. There's just one more stage to go. If God is real, then he defines the truth, and we can come to know the truth, but we can't make the truth. That's where we started, wasn't it?
Yep.
So then how do we come to know the truth? Well, we come to know the truth by general revelation and by special revelation.
Yeah.
But here's where we have to start qualifying how we can come to know the truth. So the next stage of our flow chart is to say that we can come to know the truth in these ways, but we can only come to know the truth imperfectly.
Okay.
And as Christians, there's two reasons that we hold which limit kind of the knowledge that we can have of the truth. And so we just need to go through those, really.
Okay. So in what ways are we limited then?
So first of all, our grasp of the truth is limited because we're finite. So God is infinite.
Yes.
He is able to hold all knowledge and truth inside himself. However, we are not infinite, we're finite. So we simply don't have the capacity to know the whole truth as God knows it. And this isn't something to be despondent about. This isn't a kind of failure on our part. This is just what it is to be a human, rather than to be divine. So to take, for example, our conversation now, you know, you can talk to me and I will never be able to perfectly understand what you're saying because I'm limited in my ability to understand.
Yeah.
And you're limited in your ability to express yourself.
Okay.
So our knowledge of what one another means will only ever be incomplete.
Right.
Whereas God, because he's made you and he knows you perfectly, he can know exactly what you want to express. So it's a simple illustration.
Yeah.
There's a difference between divine knowledge and finite knowledge. That's the first limitation that we have.
No, that's really helpful. And so you said there's a second way we're limited. What's that then?
So the second way that we're limited is our grasp of truth is corrupted because of sin. So if we're Christians and we do believe that the Bible reveals the truth to us, then part of the truth that the Bible reveals is that although God in his goodness made a good world, we chose to turn away from that and to live in line with how we think is best, to live in our own way rather than to live in the way that God had designed us to live. You might say we chose to be whoever we wanted to be, rather than to be who we were created to be. And this was tragic, really, because what happened was not only was this unjust of us to turn away from the good God who created us and to rebel and to try and live our own way. But it also brought immense suffering for us, because we then try to live as humans in ways that we just weren't designed to live, which brings pain and evil and these sort of things. And that's what the Bible means by sin.
Yes.
And sin affects everything in this world. And say life is bittersweet for us now. It's full of goodness because a good God created it, but it's also full of suffering and evil because we've turned away in sin.
So that's the whole storyline of the Bible, isn't it, really? That God creates this good and beautiful world, but we turn away, we rebel and fall into sin, and that it's that God has been redeeming us and bringing us to salvation ever since. Yeah,
and one day we believe that Jesus will come again, put all things right, sin will be dealt with. But until that day, we live in between, in this mix of goodness because of the good creation of God, and evil and suffering because of the presence of sin. And this affects everything, but including our grasp of the truth. So I can come to know the truth because of the goodness of God, but my grasp of truth will always be slightly corrupted because of the presence of sin. So to use a metaphor, sin always blinds us in some ways. So whilst we can see the truth, we'll never see it perfectly because sin has damaged our eyes and our ability to see.
Okay. And I guess thinking about it, for the Christian, we believe that one day sin will be removed and we won't have to deal with the struggle of that anymore. And so that won't affect our knowledge of the truth anymore. But we will still be finite. So we're never going to grasp it fully.
I totally agree. Although our sin will one day be gone, because we'll still be finite, we'll never know the truth like God knows it. We'll always be limited in our grasp of the truth. But we can grasp something of the truth. We can come to know something of the true truth. And that means that as Christians, we should be both humble and confident when it comes to knowing the truth.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that we can be confident that there is actually a truth to know. There is a reality out there, a true truth, and not only is it there, but we can grasp it to some extent. And that should give us confidence that we don't have to live in a relativist situation where we can't really know anything, we're always on shifting sand. But we also have to be realistic about our limitations, and this is what brings a humility, that we should always be open to being wrong, to change, to growth, to learning more of the truth over time. And that really should characterise a Christian approach to knowledge, confidence and humility, both held together.
That's really interesting. And I think in a minute, it'd be good to explore how that relates to our culture. But before we move on, there was a question that you dodged earlier. That I want to just bring us back to. So,
won't let me get away with it.
No, you've got to answer it. So, what do we do when our different ways of knowing the truth contradict?
It is important we tackle this question. So, thanks for bringing it back up. I think the first thing I want to say is, the first thing we do is not panic. In fact, we shouldn't even be surprised if what we've just said is true, that because we're finite and because we're sinful, our grasp of the truth will always be imperfect. Well, that means that then we should expect there to be times where our different ways of knowing the truth seem to contradict to us because of our limitations. So we don't panic. In fact, we say, I am led to expect that this will be the case at times. And so what we can do when we've not panicked is reapply ourselves to all four ways of knowing the truth and work on them all. Because if there is a true truth, and these are the ways that God reveals it to us, we can trust that as we grow in knowing the truth in all of these ways, we will have less and less contradictions. So, for example, a classic one that's often posed is, well, doesn't the Bible contradict science? But actually, in my experience, that's normally when we've got a bad grasp of how to read the Bible or a bad grasp of science. The more we grow in both of those areas, the apparent contradictions disappear. And so that's the main thing for us really, is we press on in all four ways. if we're forced, then
if you have to,
if we can't get there, if we can't resolve a difference, and we have to prioritize one way of knowing over the others, then, as I said earlier, for most Christians, the Bible will take the place of the most authoritative. In the end, it will carry the most weight. But using it to trump other options is very much a last resort. And I'd suggest it's better sometimes to try and just live in tension.
Yeah.
If you've got some unresolved kind of conflict, it's better to live with that tension and try and work at resolving them in all four ways. But if push ultimately comes to shove, then most Christians would say the Bible is the ultimate authority of our ways of knowing.
Well, thank you for answering that. And it's been good to tie you down to that. So, Tim, we spent most of our evening tonight exploring how Christians come to know anything at all.
Yeah.
And that's been really interesting, and it's going to be helpful as we go through in unravelling as well. But in the last bit of our evening tonight, can you talk us through why that matters so much?
Yeah.
Because in part one of Unravelling, we spoke about the stories of identity and the story of power and oppression. But I wonder if you can show us how the Christian worldview speaks into those issues.
Yeah, we can do that in a small way. I think the next Unravelling evening, part two, we're going to be looking at that a lot, about how the Christian worldview compares with the worldview of our culture. But maybe we can do a sort of 10-minute teaser for that tonight.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think we've already covered a lot of ground tonight. But if you could just give us something that will help us ground us into the next section.
Yeah, let's walk through two examples of the two stories that we've looked at so far then. So if we start with the identity story, we saw then that starts from the assumption that there's no God, so all we have is nature, and therefore we have to make our own meaning. And for the identity story then, we had to self-create our own identity.
Yeah.
Whereas for the Christian worldview, we're starting from a totally different starting point. God is real, therefore it's not just that we have nature. And this makes a big difference when it comes to identity. For our identity story, when we have to create our own identity, we primarily define who we are then by our thoughts, our feelings, our will to make who we are.
Yep.
Whereas in the Christian worldview, because I'm created by God, then my identity isn't something that I have to make. This is something that's given to me as a gift. And so I can come to know my identity, but I can't create it. And that's a big contrast.
Yes, so this is the contrast between mimesis and poiesis. So we don't make ourselves, poiesis.
Yeah.
We learn about who we were made to be, which is mimesis.
Yeah, so our key identity task as Christians is not to create ourselves, but to learn who we were created to be and to live more fully in line with that. And so finally for our culture, that's a big contrast there, but then for our culture, if we do have to make ourselves, it's then important to express that identity and for that identity to be accepted by others. We talked about that. Essentially, our identity project has to be successful.
Yeah.
Whereas for the Christian, because my identity is a gift, then not only is it the case that it doesn't matter if other people don't fully accept who I am, but even I don't need to fully know or fully come to accept who I really am. I know that I'm finite. I know that I'm corrupted by sin. And so my knowledge of everything, including of myself, will always be limited.
So it's like when you said earlier that we can be confident and humble. It's the same here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we can be confident that God knows who we are and he will reveal that to us.
Yeah.
But I can still be humble that I'm finite and I'm not going to fully know myself and understand myself completely.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that confident and humble thing again.
Yeah, you can trust that you do have a beautiful identity and accept that it's okay to struggle with that identity. And I really like this quote by Chris Watkin, who we've come across before in his book, Biblical Critical Theory. He writes this: "The prospect of my true identity being revealed in Christ on the last day means that I'm not faced with the choice of either realizing and actualizing all the aspects of myself now or having them lie dormant forever. That's kind of where our culture's at.
Yeah.
But he says, my identity can be messy, confusing, and even frustrating to me in the present in a way that does not signal an ultimate or final denial of who I am. By the grace of God, I am what I am, and what I shall be has not yet been made known. In a late modern culture that rhymes complete self-expression with authenticity and places a heavy burden on selves to become transparent and fully actualized, I know that as a Christian, I need not be crushed by the obligation of having to fully express or even fully to understand myself here and now. Christians do not need to be terrorists of identity, forcing the full disclosure and realization of the self here and now. As Christians strive for wholeness and authenticity in these last days, they look to the future apocalyptic unveiling of identity, when what is sown in dishonour will be raised in glory, letting nothing move them, because they know that their labour in the Lord is not in vain. So towards the end, he's using a few different quotes from the Bible there, but I love what he's trying to get at here about how free we can be from the pressures of identity that are just normal now in our culture.
Yeah, that's really comforting to know. So we can see how that's playing out with identity.
Yeah.
But what about the story of power and oppression?
Yeah, the power and oppression story. So we remember that begins in the same way. God's not real, therefore all we have is nature, therefore we make out a meaning.
Yep.
But for the power and oppression story, the focus was that we as social groups make meaning, and therefore all reality is constructed by those who are powerful, the powerful groups in society.
And as Christians, we would disagree.
Yeah.
Because for us, reality is constructed by God and not by those in power.
Yeah, which makes a massive difference. So if reality is not just socially constructed by the powerful, but actually resides in God, then the next step of the flow chart, for this story of power and oppression, all communication then just becomes an expression of power. It becomes a power play of me trying to exert my influence and manipulate you, you try to do the same to me. But if truth is held in God, then we as Christians can step outside of that.
Okay.
All communication doesn't have to be reduced down to power plays.
But, so I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But there are ways, and there are times that people use the way that they speak, or that can be manipulative or hurtful. And is that not a way that people are asserting power?
Yeah, so we don't deny all of that.
Okay.
In fact, our belief in the presence of sin should lead us to expect that sometimes we do use communication to oppress or to try and manipulate. But we're not stuck in the depressing situation where all our communication is just reduced to that level.
So that's all there is.
So we can accept that happens, but we can also be confident again that part of our communication to one another can be a genuine search for the truth together as well. It's not just my perspective versus your perspective and the stronger perspective wins. It can be that both my perspective and your perspective can move us towards both knowing a truth that's really true, a reality that's actually real. And within that, of course, we want to take into consideration the particular perspectives that we have from where we come from in life, the particular experiences that we have. And some of those will be determined by the social groups that we're in. Yeah. We deny none of that.
Okay.
But it's not just reduced to that for us.
Right. Okay. So for the Christian then, our knowledge or our grasp of the truth is not always controlled by our social group.
Yeah, so in the story of power and oppression, when you make a truth claim, when you say, this is true, this is good, this is beautiful, that claim is going to be judged based on the social group that you come from. Yeah. And whether it's true or not is going to be made on that basis. But we don't believe that because truth isn't held by nature. Yeah. Truth is held by God. So for us, any truth claim, any statement is judged with reference to whether it lines up with the truth that is actually true in the mind of God, if you like, whether it's good and beautiful according to his standards not according to any particular social group.
And I guess we've worked that out through that general revelation or that special revelation. Okay. And I guess that means that the social justice that we see in this worldview isn't going to fit very well with the Christian worldview.
Yeah, I think not. I think in some ways there's some similarities. We would want to oppose power where it becomes oppressive. We'd want to stand up for those that are victims of injustice.
Yeah.
But how we define oppression is probably going to differ.
Okay.
We would want to be active in trying to bring about a better world and to make a difference. But the key thing really is that for us, all of these things are going to be judged according to the standards that we get from God and his truth, rather than the standards that come from a particular perspective of a group of humans. Okay.
And I guess that this means that the social justice that the cultural worldview holds, that's not going to sit very well with the Christian worldview.
No, I don't think so. We're going to want to oppose power where it becomes oppressive and speak up for those who are oppressed. And we're going to want to take account of the different perspectives that people bring. And we're going to want to kind of do something. We're going to want to be activists. But, and it's a big but, we're going to take our reference points from a morality that's defined by God. So what's good and bad, true and untrue, we're going to take as defined from him, whereas the story of critical theory is going to take its reference points from a very different place.
Okay. And also, where that story assumes that social justice is the way that we can achieve certain things, as Christians, we're ultimately relying on God to save us.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. We're relying on God to save us from our sin, salvation. And that's both personal dimension. We're relying on God to save each one of us from our own corruption and suffering, but also sin on a social scale. We're relying on God ultimately to save us from the way that's played out in the problems in our society. So that doesn't mean we sit on our backsides and do nothing about it, but it does mean that we engage in justice and truth and beauty and seeking for change in quite a different way, I would suggest.
Okay. So that's a different perspective that we don't have time to dig into tonight.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I hope we've done enough tonight to start to show how a Christian worldview differs from the worldviews of our culture.
Yeah, I think so. We've covered a lot tonight. And as you said at the beginning, as we go through Unraveling, we're going to be spending more time comparing these worldviews as we go along.
Yeah, and in our next video, what we really want to focus on is like the real difference that this makes.
Yeah.
Difference between despair and hope, really, and the actual impact that these worldviews have on our experience of life and the way we see the future.
That's great. And thank you for your time tonight, Tim. And we just want to thank everyone who has been in the room with us tonight. And thank you to those of you who have been watching along. We really do hope that you continue to journey with us on this unravelling journey that we're on. And so in the next videos, we're going to really be exploring how a Christian worldview compares with the cultural worldview as we go along, because that's going to be really important when we're looking at issues of sexuality, gender, marriage, and all of those things. So we hope you continue to journey with us. You can get more videos on YouTube or at our website, amblecocec.org.uk/unravelling.